town. We're happy to be here. Playing for half the door and maybe a few beers. Here's an idea before this whole night goes south.
Al Floss presents the complete and alarming history of America's greatest garage band, the Stools.
Welcome to Season 2 of the complete and alarming history of America's greatest garage band, the Stools. Hopefully we can manage to avoid the sophomore slump, as in The Curse, not the Stools' second album, named Sophomore Slump, because we will be talking about that later, as well as curses. Rock musicians are some of the most superstitious people around, and we'll delve into curses and superstitions in a bit. The producers will probably be able to milk 2 or 3 episodes out of that sacred cow. But right now, I'd like to take you back to 1967, a seminal year in the history of rock and the history of the Stools. Join me, won't you? 1967. Canada begins their year-long celebration of the 100th anniversary of the British North America Act of 1867. Ronald Reagan is sworn in as the new governor of California. The war in Vietnam rages on, and Charles Manson reluctantly leaves the prison on Terminal Island, where he had been serving time for check kiting, and heads to San Francisco for the summer of love and, of course, to kill people.
The Velvet Underground and Nico had just released their debut album, and it's a total commercial failure. It would take years for the public to catch up to their music. The Stools, of course, not only caught up to it in 1967, but surpassed it with the release of the single, The Wine of Dreamers.
The day breaks through my window like a rock thrown from a car. The shards of light rain on my head, and I wonder where you are.
This song is the quiddity of the Stools' music. You see, it's both the essence and a trifling point of contention.
Good guess. Be right 98% of the time. It's that
So on June 1st of 1967, the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper. Total game changers. Everyone, including the Stools, had been dabbling in the psychedelic music, but it took the Beatles to show that it could actually make money.
The Stools' excursion into psychoactive experimental singles would become a working model for all psychedelic music that came after them. But remember, a model can be both an exemplar and a copy.
Once Sgt. Pepper hit, the gold rush was on. Every record label had to have their hippie band for the summer of love.
Mitch Miller had finally left Columbia Records, so even they got into the psychedelic rock business. Trying to make up for lost time, they got into a bidding war over Moby Grape, of all bands, and it cost them dearly.
Moby Grape's manager was Matthew Cates, a real waterbug of a man. He claims he invented the San Francisco sound.
Huge guy, over 6 feet tall, 6'5" with a cowboy hat on, which he always wore. He tried his hand at being a folk singer, but when that failed, he became a manager. First he signed Jefferson Airplane, and when they fired him, he took off with their drummer Skip Spence and formed Moby Grape.
When Cates was managing the Jefferson Airplane, he had this one idea to put the band's records inside coffee cans on the lids, because everybody drinks coffee. Plus, his twin brother was in the coffee can manufacturing business.
He had people in the office answer the phones, not with a hello, but with a Jefferson Airplane loves you. Hippies.
Cates' whole deal was owning the name. He didn't care about the music. He felt that the brand, not the band, was what was important, and he was going to own the brand.
He got bands like Jefferson Airplane, It's a Beautiful Day, and Moby Grape to sign these contracts where Cates would end up owning the band's name and logo, and only he could dictate who would perform under that name, and he could hire and fire band members at will. He also had a stranglehold on all the songwriting copyrights and royalties. He even had a clause inserted where he was allowed to terminate the royalties due any member of one of his bands if they were caught in a scandal, even if that scandal happened before they were in the band. All he had to do was dig up some dirt and he could pocket all the royalty checks himself. Yeah, I think Al Floss, the Stools manager, was a little jealous of him.
Al Floss hated Cates.
So Cates had his own label called the San Francisco Sound Records so that he could claim he invented the San Francisco sound. And then he rushed out and made an album from demos, leftover songs, and outtakes from the folky Tim Hardin right after he died, but that was really about it.
Cates was one of the litigants that brought down Napster. That's all you need to know about him.
Last I heard, Matthew Cates was living in Malibu and keeps running for political office, but keeps losing.
Cates has 2 cats, Mittens and Mr. Kitty. So how bad can he really be? Well, I'll answer that question right after these commercial messages.
I'm a mom and I cook with lard.
Got lard!
So Columbia Records is looking to make a splash with their new psychedelic band, Moby Grape, and they pull out all the stops. They even steal a page from Al Floss's playbook and release 5 Moby Grape singles off their debut album at the same time. Floss takes this affront personally. Oversaturation is his trademark.
To pay Columbia back for what he saw as intellectual property theft, Floss hires 2 teenagers to sneak backstage and party with Moby Grape at the Monterey Pop Festival, keeping the headliners busy as Floss worked his magic. See, D.A. Pennebaker was filming the show, which came out as the documentary Monterey Pop. But Floss tells Lou Adler that Moby Grape's manager, Matthew Cates, is demanding $1 million up front for Moby Grape to appear in the movie. Adler laughed and moved the band from their prime spot in the lineup playing Saturday night, had them go on at sunset on Friday when the place was almost empty.
And the cherry on the sundae is that Floss had the girls he hired to keep the band busy. He had them file consorting with underage female charges against the band. And he liked Floss, he would used to joke, I put the rape in Moby Grape.
Just days earlier, Moby Grape was in New York to tape a TV show, and 3 of the members got arrested for contributing to the delinquency of a minor when they were caught in the back of a car with a 17-year-old girl. Well, they paid a small fine, and they made it to the taping on time. The Stools immortalized this incident in their song, Cindy with an S.
I met a girl as dumb as they come. She asked if I spoke Flemish, as if I came from Flem. She reminded me of Lady Macbeth, only not as nice. She scared me half to death, only she did it twice. Should have said yes to a girl that spells Cindy with an S.
In music, as in life, variety truly is the spice. Howsoever, variety can mean many types, or one particular, and therein lies the rub. A spice rub.
Actually, Jerry Miller, Skip Spence, and Peter Lewis of Moby Grape were arrested with a 16-year-old girl and her 2 17-year-old friends in San Rafael while parked on an isolated fire road at 2 in the morning. They made it to the taping in New York, and their lawyer, Terrence Halliman, got them off by arguing that the girls were only there to prepare a story for their high school newspaper. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes before acquitting them.
I don't know anything about the rape charges, but I do know Al Floss got his revenge when Moby Grape played the Columbia Records Bash on June 6th of '67. The record company had papered the house by giving out free tickets to tons of hippies at Haight-Ashbury.
Columbia had flown in journalists from all over the country to meet the band. And they brought in like 1,500 kids to make it look like the band was huge. They also had 700 bottles of this special Moby Grape wine made up for the party. But nobody thought to bring a corkscrew, and they couldn't get the bottles open.
As a goodwill gesture, Floss arranged to have 30,000 baby orchid blooms drop from the ceiling of the Avalon Ballroom as the band played and everyone was dancing. Of course, with all those flower petals on the floor, it got very slippery and people just began falling down. Floss and his team of lawyers were in Haight-Ashbury the very next day, signing up any hippie that thought they might have gotten hurt at the party for a class action lawsuit against Moby Grape, Kate's, and Columbia Records.
It was the night of the big Columbia Records launch party for Moby Grape that they all got busted. They stole a T-Bird from one of the label suits, piled a couple of teenage girls into it, took off for Donahue Street up in Marin. It was a big makeout spot. So the cops turn up, Skip Spence has lost his pants somewhere, Miller's got a roach in his pocket.
I know the Stools had the last laugh on Moby Grape when Elvin Anderson got their guitar player, Skip Spence, all worked up and pilled up and got him to wreck the drummer Don Stevenson's hotel room with an axe. Yeah, they locked Spence up in Bellevue and he spent the rest of his life in and out of mental institutions.
You know, actually, it was guitarist Jerry Miller's door at the Albert Hotel that Spence chopped down. And then he held the axe to the doorman's head until he was arrested.
What really happened was, after a gig at the Fillmore East, Elvin Anderson from the Stools and a woman that was a known witch took off with Skip Spence and gave him some particularly strong blue cheer acid. Elvin convinced Spence that Don Stevenson, the band's drummer, was in league with Satan. Stevenson was the only one in the band that didn't get arrested that night with the chicks in the car. So Elvin got Spence convinced that it was Stevenson that called the cops on them. And Spence grabbed an axe and chopped down the door to the hotel room Stevenson was sharing with Moby Grape guitarist Jerry Miller.
Spence was Canadian, and I'm told that's why the acid had such a strong effect on him.
Fortunately, they were both out of the room at the time, so Spence went to the recording studio that Moby Grape was using to record their second album to look for them. And that's where producer David Rubinson took the axe away from Spence and called the cops. Rubinson had just produced a couple albums with Tommy Makem and the Clancy Brothers, so he was used to dealing with mean drunks. How much harder could it be to deal with a whacked-out hippie?
I always liked Moby Grape because they had a singing drummer. You know, like the Monkees or the Carpenters.
There are several reasons why Moby Grape's first album didn't work. It had been overhyped by the label. The band's drummer had flipped the bird in the photo for the album cover and a poster that was free inside. So the first pressing was recalled and his finger had to be airbrushed out, and I'm sure the arrest didn't help, but the main reason it failed was that hippie music from the Summer of Love just wasn't good at all. Except for the Stools, You Laugh Like a Drain.
Yes, the Stools, You Laugh Like a Drain. The poetry of the song ending in a refrain couldn't be found in any other group of its time. Who but a true poet would allow the refrain to persist and repeat, as is the true nature of the word refrain.
You laugh like a drain. I should have seen the signs. You laugh like a drain. And always at the wrong time. When I met you, your giggle was cute. Everything I said was just a hood, no matter how strange or deranged. Now something's changed. You laugh like a drain. I should have seen the signs. You laugh like a drain. And always at the wrong time.
So on February 23rd of 1967, Antonio Moretti's old friend Donald Sangster became the Prime Minister of Jamaica. The Stools sax player and Sangster had been frat brothers at Monroe College in St. Elizabeth. So Moretti flew back down to the island in April to help Sangster celebrate. One thing leads to another, and somehow they end up in Montreal. I think Antonio talked Sangster into going into the World's Fair, because he's a prime minister, even though it was a small country, they would be able to, cut lines or whatever.
While Antonio and Prime Minister Sangster were in Montreal, Sangster died of a subarachnoid hemorrhage. There are a few theories about what might have caused that. Generally, a subarachnoid hemorrhage is caused by a cerebral aneurysm or a head injury. Could it be caused by abusing cocaine? Sure. Was it? Well, I guess we'll never really know.
Were Antonio and Sangster partying? Of course. It was the World's Fair, back when those things were fun. Is that what killed the Prime Minister? Well, let me put it this way. Antonio had a habit of rolling up $100 bills to snort his coke. After Sangster died, they put his picture on the Jamaican $100 bill. Some say with a smirk and a wink. You decide.
The rest of the band went to Jamaica for Sangster's funeral. And while they were there, they recorded the song Hello List in one of those great little rundown studios they have down there.
Just another Monday morning, they warned me this would come. Cancer crows under the awning, muggy buddies like a rugby scrum. Little girl like a hurrah, she even got that thing in her ear. Venting calls like a jukebox juror, keep her near or they'll disappear. Hello list, hello list. He's a man of 1,000 voices, all of them in his head. A playlist full of wrong choices. How about something from when we were kids? Is the boss's son or is it his daughter? Not making fun, just facing facts. His secretary pulled another Carter. A fine foundation when your eyes are black. Hello list, hello list. As a guy from shipping and receiving, reading books by Nancy Drew, dream dashing and thought thieving, it'd be nice if he could catch a clue. Hello list, hello list, hello list, hello list, hello list, hello list. Hello list, hello list, hello list, hello list.
Is this early work genius? Of course not. But then, did anyone reading Einstein's first equations scribbled on some chalkboard gape in awe? Who knows? But I'll bet you dollars to donuts there's some old notebooks of his that have E equals MA squared and E equals MB squared written in them, squirreled away somewhere. Al Floss never squirreled anything of the Stools away. He'd release those as singles.
At the end of April in 1967, Fidel Castro declared that all intellectual property belongs to the people, and Cuba started publishing literature and other copywritten materials without compensation for the creators. Well, this kicks off a brief flooding of the market of bootleg Stools recordings, and then, a brief uptick in their popularity due to the nostalgia craze.
So a song the Stools never officially released, but is available to us because of the Cuban bootlegs, is a Scapegoat.
The lost single, A Scapegoat, it shows us the Stools as boys, old before their birth. It speaks of youth and a future, but has a center firm and growing harder. A certainty of motive and meaning. Stirring.
Here comes my girl, just walking down the street. Once again, I'm late for our date. you think I'd be dead meat. But this happens all the time. I get busy with other stuff. I am trying, but it slips my mind. You think she'd have enough? You can tell a lot by how we treat them. And if pigs could talk, I'd still eat them. She don't want no candy or flowers. She don't want to go to the picture show. She don't want my rings or anything, at least as far as I know. Tip my hat to her parents. If I ever meet them. But if pigs could talk, I'd still eat them. So I pick her up at her house just to change things up. Who's this hoodlum? She's canoodling while I'm standing in the shrubs. That's what I get for falling in love.
I have no idea why the Stools never officially released a scapegoat. We can only assume they were simply overwhelmed by the sheer volume of work they were producing, and it was easy for things to fall between the cracks. And we'll try to fill in even more of those cracks next time, as the complete and alarming history of America's greatest garage band, the Stools, continues. Join us then, won't you?
I'll be the Adam of your apple, be the Eve on my slave. We'll find a little garden that we two can leave. Just a little tiny house with a white picket fence to keep the neighbors away from hearing the words that we